always privileged to have with me Mr. Bill Camplin playing and reinforcing the words of some of these great poets and writers. If you've heard it, forgive me, but it always struck me. I was walking State Street, and one of my literary heroes is Bob Dylan. And I heard someone singing beautifully the songs of Bob Dylan. There was a little park on State Street, and I stopped and listened for the whole concert. And this gentleman was surrounded by his family and friends after he had played. And I walked up and I said, "Mr. Camplin," and you heard this accent. This is not from Kenosha, Brooklyn, New York. And he kind of parted the waves of family and friends and said, "Let this guy get closer. He talks differently than the rest of us." And from that has come 4 collaborations, and we hope to do more, always have goals. It's better to have dreams than nightmares, Mickey Rourke said. So, again, it's an honor and privilege, and let me introduce Mr. Bill Camplin.
I think he has gilded that story over the years. Okay. We deliver the rain every day. It's always the same. We deliver the rain. It's a beautiful place every day. We know just what to say. It's a beautiful day. Oh, I think I'm coming apart. Hey, oh, it's like we know it by heart. We deliver the sun every day, second to none. We deliver the sun. It's like a hand on the wheel every day. We know just what to feel. It's like a hand on the wheel. Oh, I think it's coming apart. Hey, oh, it's like we know it by heart. Oh, I think it's coming apart. Hey, it's like a work of art. Hey, we deliver the rain every day. It's always the same. We deliver the rain. We deliver the rain. Oh, we deliver the rain. Oh, we deliver the rain.
Program about Wendell Berry. I'm far from a scholar on the man's work. I fell in love with his poetry, and usually with these programs, I always plan a highway, but end up on all these country roads going off the highway. And so Wendell Berry brought me to other people. One of them was Timothy Egan's book about hard times, The Dust Bowl. And Timothy Egan writes, "People came to the high plains not because they had missed out on earlier land grabs, land rushes, land betrayals, and land auctions. They had missed the best homestead land, the best stolen Indian land, the best railroad grant land, the land that was quickly taken in the first Homestead Act of 1862 and the enlarged Homestead Act of 1909. What had started with a rousing slogan that thousands marched to in the 1856 presidential campaign of John Freeman, 'Free soil, free men, Fremont,' was down to the ugliest dirt in the country. Already much of the earlier homestead land planted in wheat or corn was worn out, not producing as it once did. Of the roughly 200 million acres homesteaded on the Great Plains between 1880 and 1924, nearly half was considered marginal for farming. But even by the 1920s, there was still a chance for a family to make history. People who had descended from a beaten-down part of the world. People whose daddy had been a serf, a sharecropper, a tenant, even slaves, castaways, rejects, white trash, and Mexicans couldn't own a piece of the earth. Every man a landlord meant something. Historians have been herded into thinking that the American frontier was closed just before the close of the last century, that settlement had been tried and failed in the great American desert. But they overlooked the southern plains, the pass-through country. In the first 30 years of the 20th century, it got a second look. The only way for someone who made $10,000 in 1925 to duplicate his earnings in 1929 was to plant twice the amount. And so the tractors took to the buffalo grass like never before, digging up nearly 50,000 acres a day in the southern plains in the final years before the land started to break people. What had been prairie turf for 35,000 years was peeled off in a swift decarpeting that remade the panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma, big parts of Kansas, Nebraska, and southeast Colorado. There was no worse time to plow up the grassland than in the fall, when it would be exposed for months, subject to the winds of late winter and early spring. The blow season. To leave that much land naked was a gamble, and many farmers knew it. Wendell Berry writes, "An old man who had been on many days a man of the woods has come again to this place where three streams join, where once he sat in his pleasure under the tall trees and the world's light shone from every leaf, where now a great wind has blown and he alone is still upright, his old companions all broken and brought down. It is the place of endings he has come to, of the world's end that is always near, always here. Farewell, he says. Welcome, he says. For it is the place also of the world's beginning, ever here. For here there is again a living darkness underfoot. A small wind is moving farther into time, and here he is astir among the fallen. I mistook your white head for a flower down there among the tall grasses and flowers of the garden border, and then I knew you, your years upon you like a crown of glory." On September 14, 1930, a windstorm kicked up dust out of southwest Kansas and tumbled toward Oklahoma. By the time the storm cut a swath through the Texas Panhandle, it looked unlike anything ever seen before on the high plains. People called the government to find out what was up with this dirty, swirling thing in the sky. The Weather Bureau people in Lubbock didn't know what to make of it or how to define it. Wasn't a sandstorm. Sandstorms were beige, off-white, and not thick like this thing. And it wasn't a hailstorm, though it certainly brought with it a dark, threatening sky, the kind of formation you would get just before a roof buster. The strange thing about it, the Weather Bureau observers said, was that it rolled like a mobile hill of crud, and it was black. When it tumbled through, it carried static electricity enough to short out a car, and it hurt like a swipe of coarse-grained sandpaper on the face. The first black duster was a curiosity, nothing else. The Weather Bureau observers wrote it up and put it in a drawer.
I guess I better get up now. Don't wanna miss such a day. When summer comes to the north, you gotta get out and play. I'll be bringing some junk home, plants and animals too. From all of these treasures, I'll find something for you. Hello, sunny suns. Hello, bluey blues. I got a promise to make. I will never wear shoes. It's such a wonderful feeling. Mother grass through my toes. As I wander about in these minimal clothes. And I follow my footsteps, 'cause my feet aren't afraid. A few cuts and scratches, that's a price gladly paid. If grown-ups had reasons, I ain't found any clues. 'Cause on a day like today, I will never wear shoes. Hello, sunny suns. Hello, bluey blues. I got a promise to make. I will never wear shoes. Hello, sunny suns of bluey blues. I got a promise to make. I will never wear shoes.
Many years ago, Dylan calls it, in another lifetime, I was about 17 and got involved with an Earth Day group. It was probably the first Earth Day, and we went to a lot in Manhattan. It was disused, it was in a poor neighborhood of Manhattan, and we turned it into a garden over the summer. And then I came across a while back American Masters on Wendell Berry sitting in front of William Fulbright and all the other politicians and arguing against big corporations coming in and kind of taking out the small farmers. And then I read this poem called Lookout by Wendell Berry, and I said maybe if he had to do it again, he would have just recited this poem and then left the politicians to maybe think about it. It's called Lookout. Come to the window, look out and see the valley turning green in remembrance of all springs past and to come. The woods perfecting with immortal patience the leaves that are the work of all time. The sycamore whose white limbs shed the history of a man's life with their old bark. The river under the morning's breath, quivering like the touched skin of a horse. And you will see also the shadow cast upon it by fire, the war that lights his way by burning the earth. Come to your windows, people of the world. Look out wherever you see, wherever you are, and you will see dancing upon it that shadow. You will see that your place, wherever it is, your house, your garden, your shop, your forest, your farm, bears the shadow of its destruction by war, which is that economy of greed, which is plunder, which is the economy of wrath, which is fire. The lords of war sell the earth to buy fire. They sell the water and air of life to buy fire. They are little men grown great by willingness to drive whatever exists into its perfect absence. Their intention to destroy any place is solidly founded upon their willingness to destroy every place. Every household of the world is at their mercy. The households of the farmer and the otter and the owl are at their mercy. They have no mercy. Having hate, they can have no mercy. Their greed is the hatred of mercy. Their pockets jingle with the small change of the poor. Their power is their willingness to destroy everything for knowledge, which is money, which is power, which is victory, which is ashes sown by the wind. Leave your windows and go out, people of the world. Go into the streets, go into the fields, go into the woods and along the streams. Go together, go alone. Say no to the lords of war, which is money, which is fire. Say no by saying yes to the air, to the earth, to the trees. Yes to the grasses, to the rivers, to the birds and the animals, and every living thing. Yes to the small houses. Yes to the children. Yes, the little stream sings in the crease of the hill. It is the water of life. It knows nothing of death, nothing. And this is the morning of Christ's resurrection. The tomb is empty. There is no death. Death is our illusion, our wish to belong only to ourselves, which is our freedom to kill one another. From this sleep may we too rise as out of the dark grave. The yellow-throated warbler, the highest, remotest voice of this place, sings in the tops of the tallest sycamores. But one day he came twice to the railing of my porch, where I sat at work above the river. He was too close to see with binoculars. Only the naked eye can take him in. A bird more beautiful than every picture of himself, more beautiful than himself killed and preserved by the most skilled taxidermist, more beautiful than any human mind, so small and inexact, could ever hope to remember. My mind became beautiful by the sight of him. He had the beauty only of himself, alive in the moment of his life. He had upon him like a light the whole beauty of the living world that never dies. Wendell Berry. When the native sod of the Great Plains was in place, it did not matter if people looked twice at a piece of ground. Wind blew 20, 30, 40 miles an hour as always. Droughts came and went. Prairie fires, many of them started deliberately by Indians or cowboys trying to scare nesters off, took a great gulp of grass in a few days. Hailstorms pounded the land. As long as the weave of grass was stitched to the land, the prairie would flourish in dry years and wet. The grass could look brown and dead, but beneath the surface, the roots held the soil in place. It was alive and dormant. The short grass, buffalo, and blue grama had evolved as the perfect fit for the sandy loam of the zone. It could hold moisture a foot or more below ground, level even during summer droughts, when hot winds robbed the surface of all water-bearing life. Wendell Berry writes, The Wild Geese. Horseback on Sunday morning, harvest over, we taste persimmon and wild grape, sharp, sweet of summer's end. In times, over the fall fields, we name names that went west from here, names that rest on graves. We open a persimmon seed to find the tree that stands in promise pale in the seed's marrow. Geese appear high over us past, and the sky closes, abandoned as in love or sleep, holds them to their way, clear in the ancient faith. What we need is here, and we pray, not for new earth or heaven, but as be quiet in heart and an eye clear. What we need is here.
Come outside, hear the rudolph call. The moon is shining bright. We'll get spring intoxication, so winter doesn't mean a thing. One morning soon we'll wake up warm, out in that old canoe and do a little paddling around. Oh, life can be so easy if we learn to take it easy too. We'll take a cooler and a couple of kids to where the yellow marsh flowers are found, and everything is turning into spring. Oh, these mass migrations and hibernations, it's fun to watch the world come alive. Whether we're fishing or reminiscing, there's plenty of living that I'd like to revive. We'll take a couple of sick days, 'cause if I miss it, I would not be well. When everything is turning into spring. Oh, everything is turning into spring.
Wendell Berry writes a poem called Enriching the Earth. To enrich the earth, I have sowed clover and grass to grow and die. I have plowed in the seeds of winter grains and various legumes, their growth to be plowed in to enrich the earth. I have stirred into the ground of the offal and the decay of the growth of past season, and so mended the earth and made it yield increase. All this serves the dark I am slowly falling into the fund of things. And yet to serve the earth, not knowing what I serve, gives a wildness and a delight to the air, and my days do not wholly pass. It is the mind, it is the mind's service for when the will falls to do the hands, and one lives at the expense of life. After death, willing or not, the body serves entering the earth, and so what was heaviest and most mute is at last raised up into song. The supplanting, Wendell Berry. When the road came, no longer bearing men, but briars, honeysuckle, buckbush, and wild grape, the house fell to ruin, and only the wife's daffodils rose in spring among the wild veins to be domestic and to keep the faith. And her peonies drenched the tangle with white bloom. For a while in the years of its wilderness, a wayfaring drunk slept, clinched to the floor, there in the cold nights. And then I came and set fire to the remnants of house and shed, and let time hurry in the flame. I fired it so that all would burn, and watched the blaze settle on the waste like a shawl. I knew these old ones departed then, and I arrived. As the fire fed, I felt rise in me something that would not bear my name, something that bears us through the flame, and is lightened of us, and is glad. One of the things I learned with the Dust Bowl is it went on for a number of years before anybody knew what was going on, simply because of where it was happening. And noontime in Chicago, people came out for their lunch, and instead of it being a nice sunny day, it was nighttime. And people rushed about saying what was going on, kind of like a big time scare. And finally, what happened is the dust cloud finally made its way over to the East Coast and started to cover up the cities. And that's basically what happened is the government got involved and started to send down government people to find out what was going on to bring this nighttime. And that's when FDR was first appraised that there was a dust bowl. That's why I gave the photos out, incredible scenes of people living like that. And basically Timothy Egan writes, in order for them to go house to house, they literally had to crawl on the floor so the sand would not defeat them and they would end up going back to their houses. Read you this description. Timothy Egan writes, it's from a book called The Worst Hard Time. Around noon on January 21st, 1932, a cloud 10,000 feet high from ground to top appeared just outside Amarillo. The winds had been fierce all day, clocked at 60 miles an hour when the curtain dropped over the panhandle. The sky lost its customary white and it turned brownish, then gray, as the thing lumbered around the edge of Amarillo, a city of 43,000 people. Nobody knew what to call it. It was not a rain cloud, nor was it a cloud holding ice pellets. It was not a twister. It was thick like a coarse animal hair. It was alive. People close to it described a feeling of being in a blizzard, a black blizzard they called it, with an edge like steel wool. The Weather Bureau people in Amarillo were fascinated by the cloud precisely because it defied explanation. They wrote in their logs that it was most spectacular. As sunlight came through the lighter edge of the big cloud, it appeared greenish. After hovering near Amarillo, the cloud moved north, up the Texas Panhandle toward Oklahoma, Colorado, and Kansas. Mr. Bam White saw this black monstrosity approaching from the south, and he thought at first he was looking at a range of mountains on the move, nearly 2 miles high. But the Llano Estacado was one of the flattest places on earth, and these were no mountains of 10,000 feet moving or stationary anywhere on the horizon. He told his boys to run for protection and hide deep under their little house. The cloud passed over Dalhart quickly, briefly blocking the sun so that it looked like dusk outside. It ducked its load and disappeared, its departure as swift as its arrival, the sun's rays lighting the dust. Some sandstorm, they said down at the DeSoto. No, sir, that was no sandstorm, Mother said. Did you see the color of that monster? Black as the inside of a dog. The storm left the streets full of coal-colored dust and covered the tops of cars and sidewalks on dead rock. The dust found the insides too, coating the dining table and the wood floor of Doc Dawson's place, and the fine furniture inside the DeSoto lobby, and the pool tables at Dinwiddie's, and the baseball stands at the edge of town. Folks had it in their hair, their eyes, down their throat. You blew your nose and there it was, black. You hacked up the same thing. It burned in the eyes and made people cough. It was the damnedest thing and a mystery. What is it? Mr. Melwhite asked his daddy. It's the earth itself, Bam said. The earth is on the move. Why? Look what they've done to the grass, he said. Look at the land. The wrong side is up.
It's a combination morning. What are you gonna do? Can you keep that face from breaking? What the hell's become of you? Used to by the dreams you left behind, alone and abandoned. You're still waiting for a sign. Oh, it's coming apart at the seams. Still the only thing we do is live a dying dream manufactured just for me and you. If we can break the lines we form, maybe the rest will be easy. Oh, so easy, so easy.
Wendell Berry also brought me to see these other poets. And this poem is by Grace Paley called Winter Afternoon. Old men and women walk by my window, they're frightened. It's icy winter time, they take small steps. They're looking at their feet, they're glad to be going. They hate the necessity. Sometimes the women wear heels. Why do they do this? The old women's heads are bent. They see the shoes, which are often pointy. These shoes were made for crossed legs in the evening, pointing sometimes the old men. Walk a dog, the dog moves too fast. The man stands still, the dog stands still. The smells come to the dog floating from the square earth of the plane tree, from the tires of cars at rest. All this interesting life and adventure comes to the waiting dog. The man doesn't know this. The street is too icy. Old women in pointy shoes and high heels pass him, their necks in fur collars bent, their eyes watch their small, slippery feet. I think what Wendell Berry and the following writers do for me personally is always remind me of a saying by Leo Smith, a great jazz trumpet player. He says, you know, everybody, when they hear me play the trumpet, they listen to the notes. He says, the next time you hear me playing, listen to the silences between the notes. And I think that's what these people are writing about. Bright Sun After Heavy Snow is by Jane Kenyon. A ledge of ice slides from the eaves, piercing the crew's drift. Astonishing how even a little violence eases the mind. In this extreme state of light, everything seems flawed. The street paint, the forced bulbs on the sill that refuse to bloom, and a wad of dust rolls like a desert weed over the drafty floor. Again, I recall a neighbor's smaller front. It rises in my mind like the huge banks of snow along the road. The plow passing up and down all day pushes them higher and higher. The shadow of smoke rising from the chimney moves abruptly over the yard. The clothesline rises in the wind. One wooden pin is left, solitary as a finger. It too rises and falls. One of my favorite poets through the Wendell Berry program is a poet named William Stafford. And he writes this poem called One Home. Mine was a Midwest home, you can keep your world. Plain black hats rode the thoughts that made our code. We sang hymns in the house, the roof was near God. The light bulb that hung in the pantry made a wan light, but we could read by its names of preserves outside the buffalo grass and the wind in the night. A wildcat sprang at Grandpa on the 4th of July when he was cutting plum bushes for fuel before Indians pulled the west over the edge of the sky. To anyone who looked at us, we said, my friend, liking the cut of a thought, we could say hello, but plain black hats rode the thoughts that made our code. The sun was over our town. It was like a blade, kicking cottonwood leaves. We ran toward storms. Wherever we looked, the land would hold us up. William Stafford. You can't talk about Wendell Berry, I think, and he would say, definitely, without including this great woman, Rachel Carson. What is the value of preserving and strengthening this sense of awe and wonder, this recognition of something beyond the boundaries of human existence? Is the exploration of the natural world just a pleasant way to pass the golden hours of childhood, or is there something deeper? I am sure there is something much deeper, something lasting and significant. Those who dwell as scientists or laymen among the beauties and mysteries of the earth are never alone or weary of life. Whatever the vexations or concerns of their personal lives, their thoughts can find paths that lead to inner contentment and to renewed excitement in living. Those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts. There is symbolic as well as actual beauty in the migration of the birds, the ebb and flow of the tides, the folded bud ready for the spring. I should ask that her gift to each child in the world be a sense of wonder, so indestructible that it would last throughout life, as an unfailing antidote against the boredom and disenchantments of later years, the sterile preoccupation with things that are artificial, the alienation from the sources of our strength. Exploring nature with your child is largely a matter of becoming receptive to what lies all around you. It is learning again to use your eyes, your ears, your nostrils, and fingertips, opening up the disused channels of sensory impression. For most of us, knowledge of our world comes largely through sight, yet we look about with such unseeing eyes that we are partially blind. One way to open your eyes to unnoticed beauty is to ask yourself, what if I had never seen this before? What if I knew I would never see it again? Rachel Carson continues, in my mail recently was a letter that bore eloquent testimony to the lifelong durability of a sense of wonder. It came from a reader who asked advice on choosing a seacoast spot for her vacation, a place wild enough that she might spend her days roaming beaches unspoiled by civilization, exploring that world that is old but ever new. Regretfully, she excluded the rugged northern shores. She had loved the shore all her life, she said, but climbing over the rocks of Maine might be difficult, for an 89th birthday would soon arrive. As I put down her letter, I was warmed by the fires of wonder and amazement that still burned brightly in her youthful mind and spirit, just as they must have done 80 years ago. The lasting pleasures of contact with the natural world are not reserved for scientists, but are available to anyone who will place himself under the influence of earth, sea, and sky in their amazing life. I like to remember the distinguished Swedish oceanographer Otto Pettersson, who died a few years ago at the age of 93, in full possession of his keen mental powers. His son, also world famous in oceanography, has related in a recent book how intensely his father enjoyed every new experience, every new discovery concerning the world about him. He was an incurable romantic, the son wrote, intensely in love with life and with the mysteries of the cosmos. When he realized he had not much longer to enjoy the earthly scene, Otto Pettersson said to his son, "What will sustain me in my last moments is an infinite curiosity as to what is to follow." Rachel Carson writes. And finally, I love this passage. If you are a parent who feels he has little nature, lore at his disposal, there is still much you can do for your child. With him, wherever you are, and whatever your resources, you can still look up at the sky, its dawn and twilight beauties, its moving clouds, its stars by night. You can listen to the wind, whether it blows with majestic voice through a forest or sings a many-voiced chorus around the eaves of your house or the corners of your apartment building. And in the listening, you can gain magical release for your thoughts. You can still feel the rain on your face and think of its long journey, its many transmutations from sea to air to earth. Even if you are a city dweller, you can find some place, perhaps a park or a golf course, where you can observe the mysterious migrations of the birds in the changing seasons. And with your child, you can ponder the mystery of a growing seed, even if it be only one planted in a pot of earth in the kitchen window. Just like Rachel Carson, I think Wendell Berry would say, you have to include the Native Americans. And this is from a great book called Neither Wolf Nor Dog, Seeing with Both Eyes. See, to us, American history is how the big sea became little ponds, and whether those are going to be taken from us or not. It doesn't have anything to do with 13 colonies and some covered wagons going west. Our land was taken from us from every direction. We could look at the same facts as you, and it is something completely different. But you build your history on words like frontier and civilization. And those words are just your ideas put into little shapes that you can use in sentences. The big ideas behind them are weapons that take our past from us. I think that's a lot of where our people went wrong with your people. We didn't see the big ideas behind the words you use. We didn't see that you had to name everything to make it exist, and that the name you gave something made it what it was. You named us savages, so that made us savages. You named where we lived the wilderness, so that made it a wild and dangerous place. Without even knowing it, you made us who we are in your minds by the words you used. You are still doing that, and you don't even know it is happening. I hope you'll learn to be more careful with your words. Our children don't know the old language so well, so it is your English that is giving them the world. Right now, some of the ideas in your words are wrong. They are giving our children and yours the world in a wrong way. There was an old man who told me when I was a boy that I should look at words like beautiful stones. He said I should lift each one and look at it from all sides before I used it. Then I would respect it. We didn't know this. We didn't even know what it meant. We just belonged to the land. You wanted to own it. And here is something that I think is important. It could be carried around with you, your religion. You couldn't understand what it meant to us to have our religion in the land. Your religion was in a cup and a piece of bread, and that could be carried in a box. Your priest could make it sacred anywhere. You couldn't understand what was sacred for us was where we were, because that is where the sacred things had happened and where the spirits talked to us. You people did not know about the land being sacred. We did not know about the land being property. We could not talk to each other because we did not understand each other. But pretty soon your people were not like a stream or even a great river anymore. They were like a great ocean. This ocean washed us back upon each other. It washed us off our land. We did not know what to do. You were everywhere. You were killing all the animals. The buffalo were gone. The birds were gone. You put 2 rails across the country that the buffalo would not cross. Then you rode by on your trains and shot the buffalo as you passed. You left them to rot in the sun. You would not let us hunt. You gave us blankets and whiskey that made our people crazy. We were put in little pens of land that were like tiny islands in the sea. The worst thing is that you never listened to us. You came into our land and never listened. After Sitting Bull was killed, the blanket Indians were so scared that they didn't even dare demand a decent burial for him. The soldiers put him in a pine box and threw him in a hole, left him wrapped in a bloody blanket. I heard they even threw some chemical stuff on his body so he decomposed faster. This was a man who should have been honored by his people, and they were throwing chemicals on him so he would rot faster. That is not the way it should be. Good leaders wait to be called, and they give up their power when they are no longer needed. Selfish men and fools put themselves first and keep their power until someone throws them out. It is no good to have a way where selfish men and fools fight with each other to be leaders while the good ones watch. You made us follow this way, so now we have no government worth the name. Our leaders have no power. Our rulers are not leaders. That is why Sitting Bull was great. He did not rule, he led. And again, Native American, walking with grandfather. But the one lesson that has helped me through several difficult moments in my life is about the trail itself. Grandpa Albert had a habit of stopping now and then and looking back down the trail. Frequently, he would take me by the shoulders and ask me to look back at the way we had come. Remember the trail, he said, because one of these times I will send you back alone. If you don't remember the way you have come, you will be lost. That was my first lesson about the land and identity. Who and what we are is a work in progress. Life shapes us constantly, day in and day out. Life is obviously the trail we walk. No one is exempt, therefore no one is unaffected by what happens along the way. But we don't start off on the trail with nothing. I could still see my grandpa walking ahead of me. He was very vigorous for a man in his 60s, and I can recall having to trot and even run to keep up now and then. In much the same way, some of the things he tried to teach me were difficult for a boy of 6 or 7 to understand, but I am beginning to understand more and more now. Overall, it's an awesome feeling. There are moments when Grandpa would stop just at the crest of a hill, and then he would turn to me and ask, "Are you ready to see beyond the hill? I'm on the verge of being an elder, and I can't wait to see what is over the hill, because it's where my grandpa was taking me all along. It's part of who and what I am, and still becoming. I'm still a work in progress." I'd like to close with Tim Egan and, of course, Wendell Berry. The High Plains never fully recovered from the Dust Bowl. The land came through the 1930s deeply scarred and forever changed, but in places it healed. All told, the government bought 11.3 million acres of dusted, overfarmed fields and tried to return much of its grassland. After more than 65 years, some of the land is still sterile and drifting. But in the heart of the old Dust Bowl now are 3 national grasslands run by the Forest Service. The land is green in the spring and burns in the summer, as it did in the past. Some things are missing or fast disappearing. The prairie chicken, a bird that kept many a farmer alive in the dark days, is in decline. Its population down by 78% since 1966. The biggest of the restored areas is Comanche National Grassland, named for the Lords of the Plains, which covers more than 600,000 acres, much of it in Baca County plains. Plans are underway to reintroduce bison in the shortgrass prairie, as was done in tallgrass preserves in other parts of the Great Plains. However, the Indians never returned. Despite New Deal attempts to buy rangeland for the Native Americans, the Comanche live on small reservations near Lawton, Oklahoma. They still consider the old bison hunting grounds between the Arkansas River and Rio Grande, where the wind blew free and there was nothing to break the light of the sun, as Ten Bear said, to be theirs by treaty. Words by Wendell Berry. What is one to make of life given to putting things into words, saying them, writing them down? Is there a world beyond words? There is. But don't start. Don't go on about the tree unqualified, standing in light that shines to time's end beyond its summoning name. Don't praise the speechless starlight, the unspeakable dawn. Just stop. Well, we can't stop for a while if we try hard enough. If we are lucky, we can sit still, keep silent. Let the phoebe, the sycamore, the river, the stone call themselves by whatever they call themselves, their own sounds, their own sonnets, and thus we may know for a moment the nearness of the world, its vastness, its vast variousness, far and near, which only silence knows. And then we must call all things by name, out of the silence again, to be with us or die of namelessness. Wendell Berry.
I lived in the village of kindness, stays with me just like a dream. The weather was not at all special, but the people were nice. The people were nice, oh, the people were nice, it seems. There was plenty of room in kindness. There were parks all over the place. We slept outdoors in the summer, just to stare off into space, just to stare off into kid was having a bad day, they didn't get pushed or shoved. Maybe a little education, but always a whole lot of love. Always a whole lot of love. And when a grown-up was having a bad day, it didn't have to blow in the smoke. There was always someone to talk to who could tell them a funny joke. Who could tell them a funny joke. Not much for souvenirs or trinkets. Most of the people left them alone. Except for tiny bumper stickers that said, take a little kindness home. Take a little bit of kindness back home. So here's to the people of kindness. They're the happiest people I know. And here's to the ones who live elsewhere. God